Birds are in the sky.
What makes a warrior is how they see challenges and adversity as opportunities. Warriors grow, prepare, and prevail through their crucibles. Whether you're active duty, retired, or veteran, whether your battlefield is in entrepreneurship, business, or just climbing life's ladder, you'll gain some of what makes a warrior. Insight. Lessons of grit, adaptability, and the warrior's spirit will inspire you to smash through anything that stands in the way of your mission. Buckle your seatbelt as fellow U.S. Marines, Emmy Award winner Colonel Riccoh player, and international best-selling author Zachary Green interview fellow warriors and share how they conquered their crucibles.
Yes, sir. We're gonna smoke them.
Well, good to see ya. I'm here with my brother in crime, Zachary Green, Marine veteran, firefighter, serial entrepreneur, and this is the Warrior's Voice. I'm Riccoh player, and this gentleman to my left,
the man, the myth, the legend.
This guy, he'll tell his own story, but this is Colonel Brad Ward, and we're here aboard the picturesque campus that is Parris Island. And for those that are listening, we are in his office, and I won't talk about all the Alabama stuff that's on his wall, but we are surrounded by Marine Corps memorabilia. Brett, thank you for being with us today.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. I tell you, it really is it's an honor to be here with both of you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Parris Island and what we do here at Parris Island, the land that God forgot. The sand's 18 inches deep and the sun's blazing hot. So,
and I got to tell you, 30 years ago and about 50 pounds ago, I was just right outside your hatch there, and never in a million years did I think I'd be sitting next to two colonels. So I'm got to be honest, I'm a little nervous right now. So usually when that happens, something really good's happening or something really bad's happening. So
that's a true story.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you grew up and how you ended up joining the Marine Corps?
Sure. Yeah, I come from a little town called Groves, Texas, which is east of Houston and right on the border of Louisiana. I spent most of my young life there, and with all of my family though in Alabama. So we're kind of back and forth all the holidays, Christmas and summer, stuff like that. I spent in Alabama with the rest of the family. So that's where I grew up, and I joined the Marine Corps because in Texas and Alabama, as you know, sports is a big thing. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be a part of a team, and I wanted to be a part of a team that had a big name, the one that you would be proud of. And I think it's clear why you would go to the Marine Corps, and because of that. I like the tie to the big name and the pride associated with being a U.S. Marine, and so that's the reason I joined the Marine Corps.
So the sports aspect of it. You're built like a wrestler. What was your sport growing up? Football. What position?
Yeah. I was a defensive end, and that was primarily I was defensive end. I played some offense, but really defensive end was my position. And you're right. Funny enough, wrestling, you say that, but we didn't have back then in the 70s and 80s wrestling in that part of Texas wasn't a thing yet. So football was it, and then of course Alabama football. So
the interview was going so well.
I know, I'm sorry, but I have to do that.
All good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because for those of you listeners that are not familiar with the military, we have officers, and then we have what's called a Mustang officer. Now, Mustang officers really are the creme de la creme. That is what the guys and girls respect so much because they've actually worked their way up through the enlisted ranks to then become an officer. And Colonel Player is a Mustang officer, but I don't think I've ever met a Mustang drill instructor officer. So, Colonel, let's talk a little bit about your journey to the seat you're sitting in right now.
Well, it's been an interesting one. I'll say that. I think probably like most young Marines, when I graduated recruit training, I wanted to be like my drill instructor. So much so that though I didn't believe I would necessarily stay in a very long time, I didn't think at the time, I did want to be a drill instructor. So I talked about it enough when I finally put my package in, we call it, to become a drill instructor. I think my wife, Debbie, was just relieved that I'd finally done that. So I put a package in, I got selected, and I came to Parris Island to be a drill instructor. And I was a drill instructor from 1993 to 1995 with 3rd Recruit Training Battalion. And I got to tell you, 34 years now in the Marine Corps, that still is one of the most rewarding tours that I've ever had. Just the ability to impact, influence, mold the young men and women of this country, and the camaraderie among the drill instructors. It really meant something to me. And to this day, now that I'm here as the regimental commander coming back to Parris Island, responsible for 5 battalions and drill instructor school, I could not imagine a more rewarding tour than this now, being in charge and responsible for the drill instructors.
And sir, I don't think the country and the Corps could have a better person in that position, because when I look at leadership, for me, my definition of a true leader is someone that develops other leaders. And if you think about what you did as a drill instructor, developing the future leaders of the Marine Corps, and now the position you're in where you're developing the leaders of those leaders, pretty exciting. So what brought you from the drill field to ultimately decide you wanted to get a commission and then kind of work your command ranks up from there?
I tell you, as much fun as I was having as a staff NCO, I later trained officer candidates at officer candidate school. We call those Marines sergeant instructors. So I was a sergeant instructor, and I realized that I could have a greater influence over a larger impact of Marines, and I could make policy as opposed to just always enforcing policy. And for me, that was it. I just wanted to have a greater influence over a larger crowd, if you will, and that was the way to do it. And I tell you, that's been 20-something years now since I got commissioned, and that has really played out. The ability to stand in between a Marine and a problem and solve that problem has been the ultimate reward. And that's what I have been able to do as an officer. I can get in between that Marine's problem and headquarters Marine Corps, which is where it almost always originates, or is solved, I should say. Let me correct myself, where it is solved. How about that, Riccoh? Good correction, huh? And I can help them. Whereas had I not become an officer, it's just so much harder. I actually can help most senior enlisted problems because of my rank. And that is, Debbie enjoys the paycheck. I enjoy that part of it. This is a people business. We say it all the time. We don't always live that, but that is what I've appreciated and enjoyed the most, the people part of this business.
And we hear that so much. It's solving problems, and not the what or the how, but the why. Those are what we really find, solving problems and the why. So thank you for sharing that, sir.
Yeah.
So, Brad, can we backtrack a little bit in the sense that you went through DI school, received the Smoky Bear, and you, how many series did you get through?
I graduated as a drill instructor, 7 platoons.
7 platoons.
6, 7 platoons.
Okay, so you know what you're talking about. You're an expert when it comes. You went through the training,
Yeah.
got the Smoky, successfully finished the tour, and now to come back. If you compare and contrast or build a Frankenstein, the best of the best for a drill instructor, what you would expect, what would that creature look like?
Well, Riccoh, that's a good question. You must have spent some time. If it was me, it would have taken days to figure that out. You thought about that on your way over to the office, no doubt. But let me answer that question. I'll tell you, first and foremost, the Marine Corps needs Marines to come here that have a burning desire to train recruits to become U.S. Marines. I mean, a true desire to come here and do this job. And that is because it's difficult. Mm-hmm. The hours are horrendous. I mean, it's not uncommon for a drill instructor to work 100 hours a week. That's not uncommon. And that is for 12 straight weeks. So I need somebody who has a burning desire to do that job, to effectively do that job day in, day out, because there are no real days off here.
All right, so for the folks that are listening, this is not scared straight for DI school.
Yeah,
I mean, this is straight scoop for DI school, because you should have the mindset that they receive extra money for, being a drill instructor, right?
That's right. In fact, Riccoh, they get a bonus just to come here. And then while they're here, every month they earn an extra $300 or so, $325, I think it is. So, yes, no, this is in no way trying to scare everybody, but that's a fact. It's hard, but very rewarding to be here. So you got to have a desire. If you don't have a desire, you're starting off behind everybody else. You also have to, you you have to have the ability as a drill instructor to, one, again, not to scare anybody, but to be able to enforce discipline. You could call it wearing them out. You could call it a whole bunch of things, but you got to be able to be the hard disciplinarian Marine. But at the same time, or I should say in the next moment, you have to be able to just effectively lead a recruit. So I need a drill instructor who can wear recruits out, be physically, demanding on them.
Like punch them in the head.
No, not punching them. No, not punching them, not laying their hands on them. Thank you, Riccoh, for correcting me. No, not touching them, but be demanding. Be demanding. Require of them and demand that they get things done in the manner in which they're supposed to get it done. But in the very next breath, be able to just be an effective Marine leader by helping them through that problem set. Because there is an element of that that's very important here. These young men and women get here, and they've never had any discipline in their lives. So when they get here, that's a difficult thing for them to overcome. I need drill instructors who are able to take the campaign cover off, figuratively speaking, and then just talk to them as a Marine leader would talk to a young Marine, but it would be with a recruit. So you got to be able to do that, because in today's environment, you can't just be the one that's always demanding, always demanding. You have to understand everybody has a struggle in life. Everybody's journey has been a little bit different, and you don't know where they came from. You don't know what might make them want to quit today, but you got to be prepared for that when they do want to quit. How are you going to react to that? It can't be you're satisfied with that drill instructor. You can't be satisfied with them quitting, because your job is to actually train them and graduate them. So I need drill instructors who can buy into that concept, to that belief.
Okay.
And I think finally, drill instructor has to be mature. You have to come here with maturity, and you have to come here with an appreciation of exactly what I've said, and that is understanding, appreciating what our role is, what our function here is with these young men and women, who, by the way, have volunteered to come here.
Okay.
They want to be a U.S. Marine. It's our job to get them through the process.
So let's talk about that process, because what I find in my journeys outside of the Marine Corps is that the process is the same no matter where you are, and that is the struggle that develops that rhino skin, as Colonel Player always talks about, that iron sharpens iron, that prepares you ultimately for your crucible in your life. You have a real crucible here that's not philosophical. Could you kind of just talk our listeners through what the recruit journey is like? Because it's a little different in the Marines than it is in the other branches. And just kind of take what happens from the time they meet with their drill instructor, or they meet their recruiter, all the way to that time where they get the coveted Eagle Globe and Anchors in their hands.
Yeah, sure. So the recruiters across the country, and in some cases outside of our country, they're looking for those young men and women, those individuals who have the intangible and the tangible characteristics to come here and survive, to succeed. So that's first and foremost, and who wants to be here. And it's important to note for the listeners that unlike the other services, I would tell you, you don't join the Marine Corps as much as you become a Marine. And that's a point everybody kind of needs to understand. You don't join the Marine Corps. You sign some documents and paperwork, stuff like that, but you become a Marine in the way we do things. Now, once they get through recruit training, or once they get through the recruiting process and they get to recruit training, our process begins immediately. Our process involves stripping them down of everything they've known, everything they've done before. We take the I out of the individual thought process. We immediately take that away. Everything they have done, accomplished, succeeded in before they got here is irrelevant when they get to Parris Island. And I think we're pretty good at that. Drill instructors have, I often say, have a unique capability to make a recruit understand everything you've done before here doesn't matter anymore.
Sir, that is so true, and again, it was so many decades ago for me, but I remember that vividly. I remember getting to the airport, because up to that point in time, your only interaction with the Marines have been great. They're recruiters. I mean, they tell you everything.
Almost misleading.
Right, and then all of a sudden they're like, don't talk to me. I'm like, well, wait a second, come on, man. And then you get on the yellow footprints, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose from that point in time.
Yeah, those are iconic yellow footprints. It's a harsh environment when you come here, and I'll tell you, it's harsh for everybody, but it's even harsher. It's more harsh for some than others, I guess I would say, because you have no control here when a recruit. When you get here, you as a recruit, you have no control of the environment. And this generation who enjoys instant gratification, if they're not happy with the situation, they go to a different computer game or they whatever. You know, you kind of fill in the blank there. But it is instant gratification, and we are dealing with a generation. You know, we talk about it a lot, but everybody's getting a trophy. Well, as both you gentlemen know, nobody's getting a trophy here till the very end. The trophy is the Eagle Globe and Anchor. Sure. So you're not told along the way, good job, nobody's getting patted on the back, and that doesn't happen. That's not in a drill instructor. And I don't want drill instructors doing that. We need to find out who really wants to be here. And you do that by putting them through harsh conditions. And those harsh conditions involve everything from, you know, us controlling everything they do to them having no control over their situation. So that the environment is difficult for young men and women, but that's a part of our process, and we're actually pretty good at it. I mean, I think the Marine Corps, we are different than the other services in the way that they live, the way that they train, and I think it's proven pretty successful for us so far.
So if you could kind of briefly take us through each phase in that process, from the pickup phase and kind of what goes up, ultimately culminating in the crucible.
Okay. Well, in the very beginning, you talked about the yellow footprints. They arrive on a bus in the middle of the night. Every recruit who comes here, doesn't matter what part of the year you get here, you're coming in the middle of the night or early in the morning. It's dark, in other words. So you're unfamiliar with your surroundings. You get off the bus, you get on the yellow footprints. Immediately, drill instructors are hollering at you. That's what we call the pickup, the introduction, if you want to call it that. They go through the administrative process. We get them through the administrative process, so all their records are good and clear. We know where their medical standing is and that sort of thing. And then they go into phase one, which is they're introduced to the drill instructors and the company officers that will get them through the recruit training process. They're brought to their living quarters. We call them a squad bay. We call it a squad bay, where everybody lives in one gigantic room, double racks throughout. And that phase, that's where the breakdown process began. We strip them of everything. They talk in third person from that day until the very end. They never say I, for example. That's what I mean by third person. And we begin instilling the discipline that's going to be necessary for them for the rest of their career, quite frankly, for the rest of their lives. You know, the self-discipline required to get through struggles in life. And I'll tell you, first phase is a struggle. Because they are now, for the first time in their lives, again, not being told when they're doing things the right way and that sort of thing. They're introduced to physical training that they've never done before. They're introduced to standards that they're not familiar with, standards that are upheld by the drill instructors. That's phase one. Then we move into phase two, where we take those building blocks of phase one and we begin teaching them some individual skills such as marksmanship, water survival, which is important. And then in phase two, we move into our core values of honor, courage, and commitment. And in phase two, because of the building blocks from phase one, they begin to understand what we're doing in the process. Phase one, they don't understand it. By the way, that's some of the turmoil, some of the internal, struggles they have. They don't understand why all these things are happening to them. But in phase two, they begin to understand it, and that's at the same time they're understanding honor, courage, and commitment. And then we get into phase three, and that is the crucible, the 54-hour. It's a grueling event. We're over a 2-day, it's a 54-hour period. They'll get 5 total meals. They'll hike somewhere in the vicinity of 50 miles in adverse conditions. By that I mean the weather, where it's like it is right now, very cold outside, or it's extremely hot. At the conclusion of that crucible, that 54-hour journey in of itself, then they are awarded the Eagle Globe and Anchor, and that concludes third phase. And then we roll into fourth phase immediately, and that's where we start calling them U.S. Marines, and they no longer call their drill instructors drill instructors. They call them by their rank, and they're allowed to assimilate into being a U.S. Marine.
So I think the common thread we find in that warrior's journey is adversity and how it helps make you grow. Because some people, when they get adversity, they get crushed and they can't handle it. It was interesting because in my experience, I had wonderful parents. I had somewhat of an upper class upbringing, never really was challenged. I had a lot of challenges growing up, but my parents fixed every possible thing they could for me. I get down here and I realize as you said, I'm equal, but I'm not even equal. I'm actually a little step or two below. The kids that grew up in the coal mines that didn't have 3 square meals a day and that were, really talking about adversity, the kids that grew up in the inner city of New Orleans, they seem to excel a lot more than I did because they already had some of that challenge. And what I found is as we moved on in the phases, even though each phase seemed to get more challenging, it started to get a little easier because you were getting used to that new rhythm. Can you kind of share with us any personal experience you've had, or maybe with one of your staff, where that adversity that would have probably crushed most people then made them a better person that they are today because they could handle all that challenge and stress and everything that happened from there?
Yeah, I do often draw on my experiences as a Marine, as a recruit, challenging times, and how that, how I can use that to get me through more difficult times. My wife Debbie of 34 years went through some very serious medical issues with cancer. So those were difficult times, as you can imagine. And I tell the recruit, so I go back to recruit training, OCS, and these times that were so difficult in life. And I think it's important for us to remember and remind ourselves that we've made it through tough times before, and whatever those tough times might have been. And it's important for us because we do want to go internal when you have tough times. I remind the recruits regularly, you made it through first phase, and that's the hardest, most likely will be the hardest time in your life, but you made it through. And draw on that experience from this point forward. So for me personally, Zach, I'm probably too often I'm referring back to my days as a recruit, thinking I can't make it. There's no way. How am I going to do this? Because I had a good upbringing. Life was not difficult for me. When I got to recruit training, it was tough. But I made it through that. And I think it's important for all of us to draw on those experiences that made us stronger, that made us a little bit better. And then when you face, which we will always again face more adversity, you reach back to those times. Because in this time, right now, I'm thinking I can't make it. If I stop and think, if a recruit stops and thinks, I've been here before. I've been here before. At times were tough. I didn't think I could make it. I can make it. I've done it before. And you push, you make it to another day. You lay your head to rest that night knowing, I made it through today's battle. Tomorrow I'll wake up and I'll fight another battle.
I cannot tell you how impactful that is, and it touches me so deeply. I was only here for 3 months out of my life of almost 50 years. That's a very small amount of time, but as I was growing my business and going through struggles that were 10 times more difficult than everything I experienced in the Marine Corps, I experienced in the infantry, I experienced in as a firefighter, where I literally did not know if I was going to make it to the next day with the stress and the challenge of losing a multi-million-dollar business, having to lose employees, and ultimately going bankrupt. It was those days in that squad bay during first phase and listening to those drill instructors helped me find that strength that I didn't know I had myself. And sometimes I gave up on myself, but the one thing I always remembered is the drill instructors will never give up on you, even when you give up on yourself. That mission to create those warriors, and it's just so incredible to hear you say that, even though that was such a long lifetime ago for me. It's carried with me through.
It's funny. This morning, Zach, we did we had a family day. We did a motivation run with a company that would be graduating tomorrow. And at the conclusion of that, I spoke with the drill instructors and the company officers, and I reminded them, we bear witness to the recruits were standing, the new Marines were standing just off to the side. And I said, we bear witness to your determination to succeed. You can look over and see 300 something new Marines. And it's because of what you have done that forever you will live, because your memory, the things you've done, the things you've said, it's right there. They'll never forget you. You've impacted human lives. There's nothing greater than that. And drill instructors do that day in, day out here. They make a difference in the lives of young women, men and women that will never fade. Never fade. For all three of us. My senior drill instructor's campaign cover is right up there he gave to me. My senior drill instructor. Mm-hmm. So, no matter how old we get, I would imagine we'll always think back on our drill instructors and the difference they made. They reminded us every day, that life is a competition. You're winning or you're losing. Every day is a battle. You win the battle or you lose the battle. At the end of the night, you know whether or not you won that battle. You wake up the next morning and you get after it again. There's no other way to live. drill instructors impress that upon recruits.
That's great.
Outstanding. So, Brad, as I'm listening and realizing as the regimental commander, there's only one regiment on Parris Island, you're the regimental commander, you're in a fishbowl, you're always being observed. You are a leader, you mentor young officers, and as you build your SOP for leadership, can you talk about some of the folks who helped you mold your leadership style?
Yeah, Riccoh, I think we all, we've all come across people in our lives that have made a difference. And there are some, I was so fortunate. I worked directly for General Dunford. I can't even describe how appreciative I am to this day of that experience. Just to see somebody of General Dunford's caliber. I've often said, that he's the closest thing to Abraham Lincoln since Abraham Lincoln himself. I just think that, yes.
And could you just, for our listeners, explain what General Dunford's position was?
General Dunford was the Commandant of the Marine Corps. He later became the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And what is the Commandant of the Marine Corps?
For the common listener, he is the CEO. He's the boss of the Marine Corps. He's the
boss.
He's the president. He's the boss. He's the
almost a godly-like figure.
Yes, and I would say that applies that reference to any commandant, but especially General Dunford. I mean, he has the nickname Fighting Joe, but he's just a brilliant man. I mean, and the lessons we all learn just from being near him. I can't even describe it. I should just stop talking because I can't articulate what he's done for any Marine he's ever come in contact with. So him, and then there have been so many others. It's not fair to try to name them all because I'm going to forget them. But General Dunford, I worked directly for General Dale Alford, and his leadership style. I don't know that we have anybody around. General Donovan, who's 2nd Marine Division right now. So those men, they come to mind immediately, but I can tell you I've got a dozen more that I could easily just rattle off. And I've got their subordinates that I could rattle off the names of that are just superb leaders that I learn from still every day. So.
All right, so I'll reel that one back.
Yeah,
and,
sorry.
And this is my last one, Zach, my last question. If you could go back 10 or 15 years to a younger Brad Ward and give, a young me, do this.
In the Marine Corps, it's funny. We have, especially as officers, but I'd say for officers and enlisted staff and COs, there's a career path that's supposed to be taken. In order to continue going in the right direction, you're supposed to do this, then you do this. I would say, always do what excites you the most. If it means getting off the path that the Marine Corps has historically said is the right way to get promoted and get schools and things, if it means that, that's okay. Do what excites you the most. Go where you can make the most difference. And if in that process it still allows you to be successful and move up the chain, good. If not, that's good too. Because in that process you've gone where you were excited about going, and you've had an impact on human beings. And I firmly believe in the end, that's what matters the most.
Excellent. So, good to go, Brad. Thanks.
Sir, any last minute parting words, anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up here?
Oh, no, heck, I'm humbled. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you fellas. I mean, I'm the regimental commander, but really and truly, and you know this, it's everybody in the regiment that's doing all the work. I'm just fortunate enough to be at the front of that line, making sure they all get what they need. So thank you, gentlemen, for letting me tell their story. It is truly an honor to be here with you both.
Well, sir, as a fellow American, as a fellow Marine, I can tell you how proud and excited we are knowing that you are leading the future of our beloved Marine Corps in defense of our country and freedoms. And so thank you for what you do.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate that.
With that, we'd like to dedicate each of our shows to a fallen service member. And I think it's appropriate that we go ahead and dedicate this show to Drill Instructor Gunnery Sergeant Will Roper. Gunnery Sergeant Roper came up with the idea for the Drill Instructor Monument, which is known as the Known Marine, back in the late 60s, early 70s. He inspired one of his fellow Marines, Bill Paxton, who actually went through and got it created. Now, Gunny Roper, at the time drill instructor Gunnery Sergeant Roper, volunteered for Vietnam. Very soon after he made it in country, he, his CO, and his rating man were all hit by a rocket-propelled grenade and instantly killed. In September of 1967, what was his remaining of his remains were sent to San Francisco for processing for the funeral. The only way that he was identified was they had a fragment of his arm, and on the arm was a tattoo that said "Death Before Dishonor." Gunnery Sergeant Roper truly, to his very last breath, did that. He did not dishonor himself or his country or his corps. Now, when his widow, Virginia, received his folded flag during the funeral ceremony, as she started to cry, she said, "Nobody will ever hear of my gunnery sergeant again." She said if he had abused a recruit, he would have been on the top of every news channel. Had he gotten a DUI or something like that, everybody would have known about it. But at the time, the only recognition our fellow Marines got was having his name in the very back page of the Navy Times. So because of that, Bill Paxton was motivated to create the Drill Instructor Monument. There's an identical one both here at Parris Island and in San Diego. And if you happen to be at the one in San Diego and you go to the center brick in the front, you'll see the brick that's entitled Gunnery Sergeant R.C. Roper, DI School 65 to 67, KIA Vietnam 967. So with that, we'll dedicate this to Gunnery Sergeant Roper and finish our podcast as we always do. Semper Fidelis.
Thank you for listening to The Warrior's Voice. If you haven't, please subscribe to this show and be the first to hear new episodes with fellow U.S. Marines Riccoh Player and Zachary Green. You can also visit www.warrior-framework.com to learn more about how you and or your business can use the Warrior Framework to conquer personal and professional crucibles.